From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Nicholas Brown. I'm a music specialist here at the Library of Congress. So great to see so many of you today. Hope it didn't take too long given the weather and transportation mayhem that was had today in Washington, D.C. We're so thrilled that we have all of the artists here tonight, as well as the composer of the piece being premiered, Kati Agos, who is at the far end. And she made it from Boston despite all of the transportation nonsense today, so we really appreciate her putting up with all of that to join us this evening. And I'll just introduce the rest of the quartet members to you. This, of course, is the Cecilia String Quartet. They're based in Toronto. And we have Min Jung Ko, first violinist, Sarah Nematala, also violin, Caitlin Boyle on viola, and Rachel DeSoer on cello. Awesome. Yay, welcome! So we're just going to have an informal chat to talk about their experience with the Stradivari instruments and also with the repertoire, and then also bringing Kati's piece to life, as they've given the world premiere already in Canada and some other performances of it. Just some context about this evening. This is our annual Stradivari concert, otherwise known as the Stradivari Anniversary Concert. And we invite a string quartet and sometimes some other guest artists to perform on the library's historic string instrument collection, specifically the violins and viola and cello that were donated by Gertrude Clark Whittall beginning in 1935. She actually built this room. We're in the Whittall Pavilion here at the library. And she was a very wonderful philanthropist who liked to compete with Mrs. Coolidge, who of course built the hall next door. There was a difference of about 10 years between Mrs. Coolidge giving her initial gift and then Mrs. Whittall's gift of the instruments. Tonight's events mark the 80th anniversary of the first Stradivari Anniversary Concert, so it's a lot of redundant use of the word anniversary, I'm sorry. And we're very pleased to be featuring the Cecilia Quartet tonight. Beyond that, we are also honoring the upcoming 150th anniversary of the Confederation of Canada. And they are mostly Canadian, if not all Canadian, and definitely all based in Canada. And Kati is also Canadian, which is really great, and she was born in Ontario. So we are all Canada all night today, which is really great. They're so charming, aren't they? So I'll start off with the quartet, because they've been here since Thursday evening, getting to know some of our dear friends that usually live in those cases over there. We have several of the instruments being used tonight, of course. There are four. The Betz violin from 1704, the Castelbarco violin from 1699, the viola from 1727 known as the Cassavetti, and then the Castelbarco cello from 1699. What has the experience been like meeting these instruments and also coming to terms with them or conquering them in the last 48 hours? That's open for anyone or all.
Well, it's been an adventure, and I think this evening will be even more of one. I'm trying to think. There's just actually so many variables and things that happen when you first encounter a different instrument, and I sort of feel like I've met a person who would be like one of my greatest friends, who I just immediately love, but I have no idea how to talk to them yet, like they're from a different country or something. So yeah, I guess that's where I sort of started.
I feel a little guilty because I feel like I'm having an affair.
Ooh!
And I'm already dreading tomorrow when I have to say bye. I mean, the Betz Strat it's a remarkable instrument, and it's just so many wonderful things about it. And I think, when you're freshly in love with someone, just everything seems so perfect and it fits you perfectly. So I'm in this, la la land where, I think we're like the greatest couple ever created by man. And and my poor violin is actually here too, and it looks kind of, dirty, and Yeah, it feels a little bit shafted, I think.
Yeah, it's been a great honor to play on the instruments. I feel quite humbled by the experience. We're really honored to be invited. And I think what's been most amazing for me is the way a different instrument can actually teach you things about yourself that you couldn't get from your regular instrument. So I've just been noticing, different movements that are possible, on instruments in general, different sounds that are possible. Like, you learn so much, even just from a few days on the instrument. So it's a pity that we obviously can't have more time, as I'm sure everybody feels who comes to play on these. But even the short time is really, really enlightening.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar to Sarah. I feel like, well, I've never actually played on an instrument this old before. A lot of violas are more contemporary, and I feel like I've learned a lot from it. Like, the response of the instrument is just it's incredible. It's so fast, and it will just. We were talking about an analogy also of like driving a very expensive car. So like Rachel said, it's a little bit scary and dangerous because it jumps at like the slightest thing that you do, but the sound is just incredible. I find it so smooth and full. So it's been such a great pleasure.
Great. Could each of you share maybe one of the biggest surprises about your specific instrument? And it doesn't have to be cheerful.
Okay. I was like, for some reason I had it in my mind that the Strad here was huge, was going to be this massive instrument. So I was, practicing like this before. No, I'm just kidding. But it's actually smaller than my own viola. So so that was a bit of a relief for me, since I don't have to struggle at all physically to play it.
I think the first day I looked at the instrument, there's a spot on the back that looks like either a knot of wood, or perhaps you were discussing it might be a fossilized worm. And so, that just made the age really hit me in the face, but also just very odd to, like lightly put your hand over wood that felt like a little soft and like very fragile. So it's a good thing it lives in that case.
Oh, there's just too many. I can't pick. Well, I think as soon as you put the bow on, I think it feels buttery. But I think high under E string, which of course is the best string, I think it really requires like no effort, and somehow it has this amazing ability to project and create this unbelievable sound, but without much effort. It's as if it has like a little tiny built-in mic underneath the bridge or something. It's amazing.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I guess I was surprised that less is more on these instruments. So when you want to pull out a deeper sound, or when you want to project more, it's actually better to let the instrument do what it does best, as opposed to trying to, put your muscle into it and pull it out kicking and screaming kind of thing. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing those. Kati, what do you think of your piece being performed on these instruments?
I haven't heard it yet, because I had an 8-hour delay getting out of Boston. So I was hoping to be able to hear the rehearsal today, but I didn't have that chance. But I'm so thrilled to be here, and I'm going to be hearing it fresh tonight with you. So I can't wait to hear it.
Wonderful. Could all of you maybe share a bit about how you started working with Kati, or with each other?
Sure. We actually, as a quartet, began a commissioning project a couple of years ago now. We commissioned 4 female Canadian composers because we just wanted to expand the repertoire for our genre by female composers who are still underrepresented. And so we just looked basically through every composer we'd ever heard of from Canada and listened to their works, and Kati was one of the 4 that really jumped out to us as just really strong, and we really just felt connected to what she was writing. So we asked her, and she graciously agreed to write us the 17-minute work. And since then, we've been learning the piece, and we've had some Skype sessions, and we had a couple of performances that she's been able to attend. So it continues to be a sort of great collaboration of trying to bring what she wrote to life.
It's nice when a piece has a life it collectively. Like now we have a bit of a history with it. We've worked together in Toronto on it. We've worked in Ottawa on it. We've done Skype from Boston to Canada. And what happens is we all get more of an investment in it. And that's really nice. It's nice to see the piece grow and our collaboration grow. And I think when I first gave it to them, they maybe weren't quite sure exactly what I was giving them. So I really thank them for having confidence in me and faith in me and learning about the music, being so open to it.
Great. Anyone else? Or does that cover it?
Oh, yes, that covered it.
Great. Kati, the title of your piece is, of course, Tantric Variations. Could you tell us a bit about the thought process that went behind creating the piece, and then maybe also some thoughts on the use of variation form?
Yeah, so tantric is from the Sanskrit tan, which means to weave out or to spin. So we weave the strands of our nature into a unified whole. And I always have been fascinated by variations, but this is my first time working in variations. And the thing about variations is composers usually do discrete variations because it's easier to do that. It's harder to make a long form, a continuous form with them because it's hard to have enough textural contrast. But I'm really interested in large form. I like my forms to be continuous, not in separate movements. So what I ended up doing was taking a very, very simple elemental motive. It's just like a little turn figure or embellishment of a single note, kind of like da 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 da. And I just use this motive throughout the entire piece. The entire piece is a meditation just on this one motive. But what I do is the motive gets increasingly melodic and it gets spun out as the piece progresses. So you hear it spun into longer melodies, and then the variations start to interrupt each other, even invade each other, so the form becomes dynamic. And ultimately, it's kind of a purification process of this motive because it flowers into a sort of fuller version of itself. And what you should listen for is there's a duet between the two violins close to the end where it sort of reaches its full self. And then at the end, it gets distilled down to just a single note because we don't really need the turn anymore. By that point, it's sort of purified down. So the piece ends with just single harmonics on the violins. So it's kind of like a purification process that we all go on together, journey that we all go on, me as the composer and you as the audience and the quartet, obviously. And I think if I had to sum it up, it would be like a developing variations then, sort of like what Brahms would have done, but my own version of developing variations.
Very cool. Maybe for the quartet, what have the new discoveries been with the piece from performance to performance? Now, I think this will be the 5th performance overall. Is that right? Or 4th? Something like that. It's in your program. So, have there been surprises from one venue to another, or from one experience, or has there been feedback from Kati that has changed the way you've approached certain sections or variations?
I think we're extremely fortunate that Kati's alive because musical notation can be so limiting. So a process like this, a project like this, I think it really teaches you that I think when we play Beethoven or other pieces, I think we shouldn't get so hung up on little musical notation that I think could somehow not be in line with what the composer had in mind. And I think, because people argue over it, and there's scholars and there's all these things, but no one would really know. No one really talked to Beethoven, right? But we're lucky, and this project is awesome because we can Skype her, we can text her and say, "Oh, is this Boeing what you meant?" And so it's been an amazing experience in that sense, seeing the piece come alive, and for us to have custody over it together. And
yeah, I think in the beginning for me, when Kati gave it to us, it was very scary. I think partly because you said it was a large scale work, so I wasn't able to. It just took a while for me to understand the form and the different variations, and so as we play it more and more, I'm able to hear more and more of the different textures and the different ways that you develop the variation. So definitely is the process, yeah.
And Kati's writing is very technically difficult. It's not. Well, I mean, you don't. There's a lot of passages that are quite challenging. Sorry, maybe that's going to expose myself as incompetent. But you know, like I mean, some composers are, you know, or in different pieces, you know, they push the artists more or less. But this, I think, is. Yeah, challenging. So we had to do some, you know, slow metronome practice for a while on it before we were able to really build it up. Yeah.
Great. Kati, how does your style in this piece compare or contrast from your other compositions, like your orchestral works or your vocal works?
Yeah, I had just finished a big orchestral choral work right before I started this, and it's called The Debrecen Passion. And they're actually, it was recorded on an album of my orchestral music, and that's for sale in the lobby during intermission if you're interested. But so it was my Guggenheim piece. I had a Guggenheim Fellowship, which was a tremendous gift, and I'd been so immersed in it for a year or more, and so when that was over and I had to write the quartet, it was like starting from scratch again. I didn't know how I would start because I was so just into that piece, and so I had to do something completely different and just start again. And I think with each work I'm trying to distill things down to a more pure approach. And so I think this piece does that a little bit, hopefully.
One question for all of you is, what are your thoughts on the Canadian new music scene and the American new music scene? And are there differences? What have your experiences been?
I wonder what you think about that, Kati. You have your hand in both. Kind of.
Yeah, so I'm an American citizen too. So the United States is a much bigger pond. Well, you guys can tell me what you think after I answer it. But Canada's a much smaller pond. There's fewer composers. They're amazing performing artists, but fewer. And so when you're in this country, you're more. It's kind of a little less. It can be sort of more competitive in a certain way, whereas Canada supposedly has government funding, although that can be, like, we supposedly have a lot more funding in Canada, but then it doesn't always end up being true. So it
depends on what province you're in as well.
Yeah.
The provinces support differently.
Yeah, so one is a little more aligned with like the state. Like I'm always getting commissioned by, like, I got commissioned by the government of Canada to write a fanfare for the 150th anniversary of Canada. That would never happen here. Like here, one is like on one's own, and one just follows one's path. So it's more like a bit more state mandated in Canada, or province mandated. So I'm lucky that I get to sort of live in these two worlds and do work in both. But what do you guys think about Canada?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think it just, like everything else, the major difference between the countries is population, and therefore the size of all that stuff. So I think that, yeah, that's right. What I'm always told by Americans is that we have a lot of funding in Canada. And then I see a lot of people in America commissioning using private foundation funds. So it's always this thing of like, America has foundations and Canada has government grants, and I don't really know if one is more supportive than the other in the end, but
yeah, it kind of evens out.
Yeah.
Well, just to give the audience a bit of background on our commissioning programs, we have a very interesting case of modeling our commissions on a public-private partnership. So beginning in 1925, when Mrs. Coolidge established the concert series here, she really wanted an institution to take on the administration of her vision, to make the concerts and music open to the public and available, but also to have the sense of permanence that private foundations often don't have, unless you're like the Guggenheim or that kind of thing. So Mrs. Coolidge went to Congress. She was quite the character. 5 years into voting rights, this woman went to Congress and lobbied all kinds of everyone to get legislation enacted to allow the government to accept private funds for cultural programming and for building the concert hall. This hadn't happened in this way before, so it was really a novel thing. And since then, we've had many other supporters. Some of you are here and come to our concerts all the time, who make these commissions possible by giving financial contributions or helping us get to other foundations. And so while we are the Library of Congress as the commissioner, there's always a private foundation or fund associated with the commission. So for example, our McKim Fund commissions violin and piano works. It's the Library of Congress McKim Fund. Or Mrs. Coolidge's foundation is the Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge Foundation in the Library of Congress. So here we are, the government's administering all of this, but the government's not necessarily giving the money for the commissions. So far, this model has worked very well for protecting the integrity of the series and making sure it keeps going. I'm sure the audience could guess why that would be the case in a public-only model. So we consider ourselves very fortunate to have this opportunity to commission folks, and it's always interesting to hear what the other models are out there. And one of our favorite things to do is to co-commission with other people, so if there's ever any ideas about that, feel free to let us know. Great. So one of the things that I'd love to ask the quartet about is your experience seeing the manuscripts that are just through there. So there are some really nice treats for all of you to see before the concert, including a Mozart manuscript and a Haydn manuscript, as well as a letter written by Mendelssohn in which he describes composing the quartet that is on the program this evening. So tell me a bit about your experience seeing those, because I know I totally surprised it on you last night.
I think for me, it like sometimes I feel so far. Well, I do and I don't, but I feel so far from music that's been written so long ago, in one way. And I think seeing manuscripts like this, like makes me feel closer somehow to this music. So for me, it's just incredible that it's just right here, and even I was looking around the library today, and it's just incredible, like the artifacts and all the exhibitions and the building itself. So.
Yeah, I'm always amazed by how unintelligible manuscripts look to me, because
Katie's.
Well, since the computer age, it's a lot more intelligible. But actually, the Gubaidulina that we're also playing is also not computer generated, so it's very hard to read. And it makes me just admire the amount of research that actually goes into learning how to read what the composer probably meant, and research that we don't really do much of. So we kind of rely on people who work in these libraries and for publishers to decipher these manuscripts and then publish them so that we can understand. And then the other thing I really noticed is Mendelssohn. There's a beautiful little painting next to in one of the letters. I hope you'll check out, and it's just so small and detailed and gorgeous that, as we know, Mendelssohn was so great at writing literature and writing music and painting, and a real Renaissance man. And so just the beauty of this painting is just struck me once again in a negative way, just how greedy some people are, and just being so talented in so many areas. But it's really beautiful.
Great. One of the wonderful connections between some of the items in there and the concert is that Mrs. Whittall, who of course donated the instruments and built this room, donated Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Mendelssohn, and Schoenberg manuscripts to the library. And she's very much one of the core reasons why we have the world-renowned collection of manuscripts of European composers that we have here at the library. And for those of you who are the nerdy type, and that's a good thing. That is a badge of honor in this building. The high-resolution scans of most of those items by those composers are up online on our website. You can download them. You can play from them if you can decipher anything. So enjoy them. You can also print them out and make them gifts. Gifts and gifts, if anyone's into making gifts. And so I definitely encourage you to check those resources out. They're available at loc.gov. And also in your program booklet, when you get them inside, you'll see some of the highlights from the Mendelssohn collections are listed specifically and with some QR codes and links for you to check out. One of the great manuscripts that we have is the octet manuscript, which is kind of just like every time you get near it. And while they were rehearsing last night, I was having fun putting the items into cases with my colleague Bob. So yeah, anyways.
There's something so special about the handwritten score that we're losing now with all the computer notation. And when one looks at those scores, one can see the personality of the composer. One can feel it just jumping off the page.
definitely, in some of the Beethoven manuscripts, of course, it's just like scratching out and writing on top of things in different types of pen or pencil. And also the paper quality differences are kind of interesting to see. From the 18th century and early 19th century, sometimes you can tell who was working in a better situation or who had a wealthier patron, that kind of thing, by the paper quality. And then some of the like 19th century American stuff around the Civil War is a little dicey in terms of paper quality. But and what excites you all most about the performance tonight?
Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but we have a bit of a girl power theme going on.
It's pretty great. We love that here.
And being here, I mean, it's a huge honor, and we're excited to bring Katya along with us and to be playing Goodbye Delina here. And like you said before, I mean, the library here is well known for its beautiful collection of instruments, but it's also quite well known because of the two leading women philanthropists of that time. And I think it's just a huge privilege and an honor for us to be a part of that celebration here. And she's a girl too, so yay, girls!
Yes, we have an extra member of the quartet on board, which will be really exciting. So does she move when you play?
Yeah,
oh, that's
yeah,
great.
Yeah. Only when we play female I'm just kidding.
That's awesome.
Just kidding.
I'm really honored to be on a program with these composers, especially Goodbye Delina, whom I met in Paris and was lovely. And thank you for performing Living Composers.
Oh, thank you for giving us something to perform. Yeah, no, that's one of the big reasons why Mrs. Coolidge came to us was because she wanted that new music component really kept safe. And it's one of the best things about our government. There's new music going on Capitol Hill, supported by Congress, which I know most people would never believe, but we're very thankful for the opportunity to be able to do this here and to have a broader community with composers and with artists such as yourselves. And I think at this point we'll open it up to Q&A to give you all a chance to chat with the artists. If you'll just hold 1 second for the microphone. I think Jay is going to come around and get one. If you just hold your hands up for a bit, and Jay will. There you go. This is Jay, everyone on Camera World. Wave, Jay.
I wanted to ask about the Canadian scene and your two cultures, if there are differences in the way music is created and, you know, tastes and things like that, because you have the French and the English aspect of your culture.
I think that all the provinces are really different. We've been fortunate enough to be able to travel over much of Canada, actually from coast to coast. The only place that we haven't been able to visit yet is the north, which I hope to go to someday soon. But I've just been astounded at how different each of the provinces are, each of the cities. There's almost small cultures within, each province. So it's a little hard to give sort of a broad generalization to the whole country because of that. And then, of course, the individual composers are so unique. I mean, the four that we chose, they couldn't have been more different. Like, one is into electronic music very heavily. One is into very, very minimalist sort of textural music. It's been really enlightening. I don't know if that's a very good answer for you,
but just maybe to just build upon that, you're going to be recording all four works, right?
Yeah.
And in the next year or so, there should be a recording of those four.
That's right.
So you'll be able to hear the range there between at least a small subset, but for composers from different parts of Canada and different aesthetic backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. We'll go over. Oh, Jay's got one in the back.
I'm curious to know, you're such modern artists and composers yourselves, and to hold such old objects that it's so rare in life particularly in on this continent, to confront or engage with such old objects or pieces of art or houses or buildings, and what that must be like from your experience as musicians and artists to behold something so old in such a modern world.
Great fear. Terror of being sued for doing something. I'm just kidding, someone has a better answer.
We wouldn't do that to you.
I think another thing that I feel like the viola has taught me is that I feel like it really has its own voice. It's like it has its own personality, and it's kind of just my job to kind of try to release that or encourage it. I mean, I know that these instruments actually don't get played continuously so often, so we also have to kind of it's our job a little bit to warm them up, I think, for to play the concert. But
it's also amazing to think that these instruments were around when like Mozart and Beethoven were actually writing the music, and they were being performed on these instruments, and we get to play on them 200 or some 300, I can't do math, years later, and like these instruments will last even way after us, and they'll be servicing millions of other artists. So yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, everything we're playing tonight was written after these instruments were made by quite a significant amount. But I think this is maybe a little corny, but I felt this connection when I first picked up the instrument, and I was like, I know it's a Stradivarius and it's from 1697, and that it's like that's so wild that it doesn't really enter me. Like I don't really understand that concept. And then I'm playing it, and it sounds beautiful, and I'm tuning it to my iPhone, right? Because I have an app that tells me my pitch, and I just felt this is the corny part. I felt like this connection of humanity. Like Stradivarius made this that many years ago. I'm playing it, technology is hearing it, and yet obviously its sound is current, right? So it's like this thread of creating beautiful music for hundreds and hundreds of years.
That was lovely. It wasn't corny. Thank you. Okay.
So that's actually a good segue to the question I had about the composition and the name of the composition, but you alluded to Bach variations, and I'm wondering about the Eastern music connection as you were conceiving of the piece and the different sort of approaches to that vibrational thread coming through.
I'm always thinking about Bach, and I'm always inspired by Bach. Every day I think about Bach. And I think with developing variations, I was referencing Brahms because he specifically did developing variations. In terms of the Eastern, I'm very interested in religion in general and spirituality and the common threads between different religions. So I think I was intrigued by using this notion of Tantra and bringing it into a work in my own interpretation of it, of course, because I don't know, I'm not as well versed in it as a lot of people, but I just loved something about this idea of completeness and looking for completeness, because it's something we all think about, and striving for completeness in a musical work seemed like a compelling thing. So
there's no tangible connection to Sufi music origin?
Oh yeah, I had set a Sufi text prior. I was commissioned to set a text in Farsi, which was actually really interesting because I don't know Farsi, and I had to understand the pronunciation and all the sounds and work with Farsi speakers. But I had set a text in Farsi, and I think that influenced, actually, thanks for bringing that up, I think that influenced, because that was like a few months before, so that influenced how I was thinking about this, I think. It was a vocal piece, so yeah. Oh, no.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to go back to the question about what you called the new music scene. You talked about it in terms of funding between the US and Canada, but I was actually interested in it from the point of view of the music itself. You gave such a beautiful description of your piece that we're going to hear tonight and the variation, and how that will unfold as we listen to it. But I wondered, I'm not a musician myself, I wondered what is really going on in the new music scene, if it is a scene, musically, what you're finding interesting. Maybe you have to name favorite composers really to answer the question, but if you'd say just a little bit about that.
Well,
I'll let you all go first on that one.
I mean, we live in a very pluralistic age, so what we're seeing now, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, is it becoming mainstream to bring influences from other kinds of music into concert music. So folk music, pop music, rap, whatever it may be, composers are synthesizing all of these different influences. And what would have been before a more marginal thing is now becoming more mainstream. So we're seeing more and more different approaches. And as far as, do you guys want to build on that?
Yeah, I think diversity of style. I think composers the sense I get is composers sound more different from each other than maybe ever before. I don't know if anyone else has. But I mean, we know, one of the composers that we commissioned is from Quebec, actually, so she's a French composer named Nicole Lisée. She was very influenced by electronic music, dance music, and a lot of sort of lesser known musical trends like, I can't remember, Ghost something.
Yeah, she's really into like the turntable. She played with turntables in her basement, and she did like the scratching on the record players.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting trend
because retro analog.
Yeah, so I think composers know that they can't ignore technology, and a lot of them are sort of, trying to tap into it and be inspired by it, which is really interesting for us. Actually, working on that piece was unusual because we fully understood where these sound ideas were coming from, but we're playing, as you said, on, antiques that were really never meant to be used to make these kinds of sounds. So we really had to work hard to come up with an idea of how we're going to bring that across on our instruments. And then also, this is more international, but we played a composer a couple of years ago from England who is very inspired by rap and really synthesized that into his music. So that was a whole other sound. We actually, we run a competition at the University of Toronto where we're in residence, where we challenge the students to write a string quartet, a 15-minute string quartet, and we choose one and we premiere and record it. And the one that we chose this year was written by a woman who is very inspired by her Balkan heritage, so it sounds a lot like folk music. So that's kind of more drawing from the past. Very, very different from Kati's piece, from Nicole Lisée's piece,
But if you want specific names, ensembles like this have to curate, right? 'Cause they have to listen to tons of music and choose. So you can look at an ensemble like this, who they've programmed, and it'll be interesting. There'll be some consistent thread, or another ensemble that you like they're playing. You can see what new music are they doing, and so that can be a good entree. Because I know it can be a bit overwhelming. Like how do you find the composers out there that are good and who to learn about? But you can trust them because they've devoted a lot of time to learning about the music and choosing what they want to play.
And from the presenter side, I'll throw in some comments and hopefully not get into anything too controversial, but presenting contemporary music is a complex thing, right? So we have what mainstream society is trending on at the given moment. We have what major orchestras are programming, which might be more conservative or less conservative, depending on what city, what country. I think there's a sense of global connections between styles of music that are person-to-person based. So you might have, like, Kati came to study in New York and worked with Milton Babbitt, and now you're based in Boston, so you have all these connections out of that location. So it's not necessarily that you're embodying this Canadian style all the time. You're creating your own style that's informed by all these different touch points. And I think one of the things that presenters struggle with is that we can't represent all of the great new music that's out there. And if you compare any presenter to another presenter, you'll see that it's not all the same composers. There might be some overlap. There might be certain artists or composers who are being picked up by certain radio stations and others who are not. But I think my recommendation, and probably everyone else's recommendation, would be to listen to as much as you can and make up your own decisions about what you like and what you don't like. There are contemporary music radio stations online. There are concerts that you can go to that are free, like at the Library of Congress, where you can hear new things. You can also, go to any public library in the country and use their digital subscription services, like DC Public Library has Freegal, where you can actually go on and download free MP3s every week. Who knew that? Completely free. So take advantage of that. And so it's not this culture where you have to just listen to X radio station that's based in New York and get their view of what's good in contemporary music. We have so much access to good and bad information nowadays that my personal suggestion is to really go out there and explore on your own and listen to what people are recommending, of course. Like, Alex Ross in The New Yorker, he has certain things to say that a lot of people appreciate, or some people might not appreciate them. But Alex Ross isn't going to cover all the great things that are going on out in the music scene, whether it's in DC or New York or Toronto or anywhere else. So it's kind of this sense of having your ear to the ground and really forming your own set of preferences, which I think is a healthy way to go. Do you all listen to the same music? Probably not, right?
No. Some of us listen to silence.
Do any of you avoid listening to music in your off time?
Sometimes.
Me,
Like
yeah.
certain types?
Sometimes.
Yeah, more and more over the years, I've just been like, I just want to hear my fridge.
I think it's like when we spend like 6 or 8 hours a day listening as our primary job. When you go home, sometimes you do want silence just for a little break.
Definitely. Any other questions?
Yes. Would you tell us a little bit about Canadian music conservatories, especially the University of Toronto, and is there a concerted effort to keep the best musicians in Canada and not send them to Juilliard or Curtis? Can you tell us a little bit about all of your music education backgrounds?
Well, Min and I, actually 3 of us now. So Min and I were actually students together at the University of Toronto in our undergrad, and we sat beside each other in orchestra and everything. And so, and Caitlin also attended the Royal Conservatory in Toronto, and then she went to Europe later on. And Rachel, you studied in the States primarily, right? We also spent some time at McGill. And I think, I don't know what you guys would say about that.
Well, I was going to say it's actually very strange being in the room, because on this side of the room I'm a defector for going to the United States to study, and then on your side of the room I'm someone who came to your lovely country to study. Anyway, so yeah, I would say that there's a concern, just to address your question about trying to keep students, there's a concern about the brain drain for musicians as well as everything else that Canadians, because it is a smaller place with fewer schools and less competitive and all that stuff, people end up a lot of the time going to other countries to study. That being said, I think we have a few strong schools, University of Toronto being one of them, and there are a lot of people who just love living in Canada so much that they decide to stay and get great educations, like Min and Sarah. So I don't know. I mean, there's definitely fewer options, and they are in the major cities, right? Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal. Those are kind of the only major cities by an American standpoint. And that's where we all end up.
Things are already, I think, much different for students that we mentor and teach compared to how things were even when we were applying for school. I don't remember there being online applications or these things, and I think there was that bit of a fear, or I think people always wondered what the outside world was like, and I think a lot of people sort of were lured by that, and I think it's great. Even back in the 1700s or whatever, I think composers or musicians would travel afar to meet new teachers and to be able to play for different people. So I think that's wonderful, and we do encourage students to travel, among many other things. But now with the technology and YouTube and all these apps and Apple Music, we can listen to and watch whatever we please. There's Medici TV, there's, all of these things weren't available to us at our fingertips before, and now they all are, available. It's never the same as going to a live performance and having that experience in person. But I think the students nowadays have a huge advantage of being wherever they are, being able to study with whoever they want on Skype. A lot of teachers do that now, Mr. Zuckerman, among many others. So yeah, I think there are advantages and disadvantages for both staying in Toronto and going abroad.
If anyone goes to visit Toronto, the Royal Conservatory building is just incredible. How long ago was it the renovation or the remodel of that?
5, 6 years.
Yeah.
Fairly recently.
Yeah. So literally, if you go to Toronto, from my recommendation, top of your list in terms of things to see. It was really spectacular, and there are historical instruments all over the place, and there's this connection between the older architecture and the contemporary architecture. So I think we have time for one last short question, which we'll do up here, and then we'll have to let the artists go to have a little break.
Oh, yes, for the rest. Could you talk a little bit about the, the difficulty, if there is difficulty, in moving between classical Western music, two of the pieces represented in your program tonight, and contemporary music, in adjusting your playing, the way in which you use your instruments, going from one to the other?
Well, I think one thing for me about new music is just or contemporary music is the extended techniques that composers now ask you to do. So they're asking you to kind of pull a huge variety of sounds out of your instrument. So you'll listen to the beginning of Kati's piece. So that's just like a much. Yeah, it's a much different technique. And so I think that in one sense, the soundscape, just the variety of sounds that we work with really expands. And then there's also some staging things. So yeah, there's a big variety that we have to kind of coordinate and know how to do for contemporary music.
For me, I think the major difficulty is that no matter how many hours we practice, we will never know one of these new pieces as well as a Mozart or a Mendelssohn quartet, simply because we haven't been living with that musical language for most of our lives. And as we were talking about earlier with the different styles of each composer, I really feel like each new piece I get is a completely different language. Like, I'm not only learning the music, I'm learning the language it's written in. So it's really wonderful and challenging, but I really feel as though I don't know really the piece I'm playing nearly as well as I will in like 25 years. And that's just the way it is,
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your insights and experiences and also answering the questions. We'll invite you all to join us in the hall, of course, in a little bit. The doors should open at about 7:30 to the auditorium, and please, please, please take some time to check out the artifacts that are on display in the cases. They're really spectacular, and we are just so thrilled and giddy to be sharing them with you, as always. And CDs will be available for sale, both for the quartet and for Kati's recent orchestral CD that was released by Boston Modern Orchestra Project. And are you going to be signing afterwards, or? Yeah, okay. So if you want them to sign, they'll be available afterwards. Sarah's husband, Don, will be taking care of business in there for you. And please check out our resources online. We hope you enjoy the concert this evening. And a reminder about tickets for the spring. They are released January 4th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And you can visit our website for all of the details about that, loc.gov/concerts. And with that, I think it's a wrap. So thank you all for your attention.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.